Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big show for you. As promised, we are going to get into a little bit of fantasy football previews as the NFL season is just 9 days away. So we're going to start off with one of the most important position, arguably the most important position, the wide receivers. I have for you today my top 24 fantasy receivers, as well as a couple of honorable mentions. We'll start off the show with that. It also is cut day in the NFL. If we have time, we will get to all of the cuts, some of the big names that are no longer on NFL rosters, as well as an update with some other wide receiver rankings. It is a big wide receiver show today, taking a look at some more CeeDee Lamb conversations and some Ja'Marr Chase updates. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show today with some fantasy football rankings. I have for you right there on the screen my top 24 receivers, and we are going to go through each and everyone. But before we get to the top 24, I do have a couple of honorable mentions to add. We'll start off, you know what, actually, we're going to start off at number 1 because it's already up there for you. My number 1 receiver is Tyreek Hill. And I know there's been a lot of discussion in this offseason for who the fantasy wide receiver 1 is going to be. It's a virtual 1A, 1E, 1B between Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb, the two top wide receivers on my list. Makes it a little bit easier now that CeeDee Lamb has signed his contract. You no longer have to worry about whether or not he will be, playing the whole season. But I have Tyreek Hill ahead of him because if there's any receiver in the NFL that is going to reach 2,000 yards, it's going to be Tyreek Hill. He was flirting with that number last season. There's no reason to believe he won't be at least flirting with that 2K number again this year. Not much has changed with the Miami offense. The situation should be relatively the same. Look for Tyreek Hill to have a huge, huge season. He is my wide receiver 1. We talked a little bit about CeeDee Lamb there. He is my wide receiver 2. Again, 1A, 1B situation with Tyreek Hill. CeeDee Lamb is going to be the entirety of that high-powered Cowboys offense. He's probably going to have the most touchdown value, so maybe he will have the ability to jump total fantasy points-wise over a guy like Tyreek Hill. But in terms of volume, I still have Tyreek Hill above him. At 3, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. He broke out. Not that he didn't break out before, but he really broke out last season, finishing in the top 10 for fantasy points. He has only steadily improved in every single year. He signed a huge contract at one point this offseason, making him the highest paid receiver in the entire league. No longer is there with the explosion of the wide receiver market, but Amon-Ra St. Brown at number 3 on the list here, he should improve. Again, still have Jared Goff. That offense is going to be great. This is the number 1. He plays in the slot too, and you don't have the best cover corner in the slot barely ever. So he's going to get favorable matchups almost every time he's out there. He's my number 3 receiver. At number 4 and 5, we have another tie between Justin Jefferson and Ja'Marr Chase. I put Justin Jefferson ahead of Ja'Marr Chase because, as we'll talk about later on in this show, I'm not 100% sure that Ja'Marr Chase will play every single game. Outside of that, Ja'Marr Chase has a better quarterback situation, so he's going to be more likely to get those big plays, but they also might force feed Justin Jefferson. We saw what happened when Nick Mullins was in charge of the offense. He was just feeding the ball to Justin Jefferson the whole time. I don't expect that to change with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold might not force it into triple coverage to Justin Jefferson, but he's still going to get his lion's share of targets. He was just paid. He's the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of the NFL. The Vikings aren't going to suddenly stop throwing to him. He is a safe floor option for one of these top receivers. Again, Jamar Chase at 5, just because we're not 100% sure if he's going to play week 1, and losing an extra week out of a guy is not something you want when you're playing fantasy. That's one of the biggest red flags. At number 6, I have Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson is a guy that I was really high on last year. We saw a little bit of his connection with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers famously loves his wide receiver ones. You remember in Green Bay, Devontae Adams for a little bit, Jordy Nelson for a little bit. Whoever was his wide receiver one was consistently top ranks in fantasy. And even without Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson still manages to put up 1,000 yards every year. He's coming off of an Offensive Rookie of the Year season just 2 years ago, and then he has to come in and play with Zach Wilson, play with, not a good quarterback play, and he's still able to put up 10 points a game in fantasy, which, if you're starting a guy, I think that should be the baseline. He puts up 10 points a game. That was with no touchdown volume and with Zach Wilson. Imagine how much better he's going to be if he has Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball, even if it isn't peak Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson is my number 6 receiver. Those are the 6 guys that I think have the ability to be the number 1 overall receivers, that top 6. As we get down to the next row, 7 to 12, finishing out the number 1 receiver area, these are guys that I think are going to be really good, are going to be really consistent, but I don't think these guys are going to be competing for that number 1 overall wide receiver spot in terms of fantasy points. So that's where I'm drawing my distinction between this top 6 and the rest of the list. But as we get to the back half, the low-tier wide receiver ones, we're starting off with A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, leader of the Eagles, just signs a massive $30 million extension of his own, making him one of the top 5 highest paid receivers in the league. Him and Devonta Smith, who's later on this list, have continued to be productive even though they're side by side, and the passing lane should open up more for them with the addition of Saquon Barkley. And that might sound a little bit backwards, right? Because you bring in an elite running back like Saquon, that should take away opportunities. But the play action game is going to be much better. That's going to get them more open. Jalen Hurts, he's a great quarterback. He had a little bit of a down year, especially down the stretch. But these guys should continue to be great. A.J. Brown especially. At number 8, we have Devontae Adams. And you're looking at the rest of the guys on this list and you're saying, oh, these guys are all in pretty good offenses, pretty good situations. Devontae Adams, not quite. But what makes me put Devontae Adams up this high is his quarterback. Gardner Minshew, for all of his flaws, does one thing awesome for fantasy wide receivers, and that is he feeds his number 1. You remember just back to last season with Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman finished outside of the top 12 in wide receivers, but he had an explosive year, earning himself a nice contract in Indianapolis, and a lot of that was because of Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew last year targeted Pittman 30% of the time. That is the highest target share in the entire league. He force feeds his wide receivers. Absolutely loves throwing to his wide receiver ones. Devontae Adams is going to be open. He is going to get the ball. He is going to get a lot of targets, and he is going to score a lot of points. That is why he is sitting here in the top 10 for me at number 8. At number 9, we have Mike Evans. Mr. Consistency, right? 10 years in the NFL, 10 years with 1,000 yards. He had an explosive end of the season with Baker Mayfield. Their connection just continues to grow. Mike Evans is my number 9 receiver. And rounding out the top 10, I have Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison is a rookie, but he is heading into an offense where there isn't really a lot else out there. A lot of people are high on Trey McBride. But Kyler Murray, the last time he had a true alpha number 1 receiver was DeAndre Hopkins. And he played 31 games with DeAndre Hopkins. In those 31 games, if you go by a per-game status, he was getting just over 6 catches a game, just about 80 yards. It was 78.8 yards a game there. So that's 6 for 80, and he scored a touchdown in 17. He scored 17 touchdowns. So basically, a touchdown every other game. So you look at that fantasy points wise, every game in a PPR setting, you're expecting 13 points at a minimum. Every other game, you're getting 20. That is a great, great spot to be. Kyler Murray is going to feed his number one. Marvin Harrison, by all accounts, is going to be amazing. He is my number 10 receiver. At 11, I have Drake London. Another situation where a guy might be a little bit unproven due to the fact that he's had bad quarterback play. Kirk Cousins, again, we saw it with Justin Jefferson, and Drake London isn't at Justin Jefferson level. But what Drake London does do really good is get open, and he's a good jump ball receiver. Kirk Cousins is going to find him. He's the number one there. Also look for Kyle Pitts to have a big upside. We'll talk about tight ends later on in the week. But I think Drake London should have a very productive season. I have him up at 11. And rounding out the top 12, my wide receiver ones is Puka Nacua. And I know that's lower than a lot of people have Puka in this league. I personally, in this year in draft settings, I personally am a lot lower on Puka than a lot of other guys. For the main reason being Cooper Kupp, who's also on this list later on, and we'll get to him probably in the next segment, is back. And in the couple of games that Puka Nacua was playing with Cooper Kupp just last season, his point production in a PPR setting went down 33%. He scored 33% less points with Cooper Kupp on the field. And Cooper Kupp is going to be 100% healthy this year. There are plenty of receivers that I love ahead of Puka Nacua. He should still be a great receiver. You put those values out, he still has 1,300 yards, right? This isn't going to be an issue. Play very similar roles in the offense. It's going to depend which one defenses focus on more. If they focus more on Cooper Kupp, Puka should be the main guy. If they focus more on Puka, then the main guy is going to be Cooper Kupp. This is going to be the main question when we're talking about a Rams offense where both of these guys should be good. I just have him slipping a little bit because I don't think he'll be that same dominant force that he was without Cooper Kupp in the lineup. But let me know what you think of my wide receiver ones. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll go through the rest of the list, my reasonings for it, and where we have some honorable mentions at the end of wide receiver 2. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. It's everybody in the world died. Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. It's everybody in the world died. Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crowd. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, I'll get my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news that fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh! I feel like I'm losing my mind. Everybody in the world died. Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. It's everybody in the world.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just went through the first half of our wide receiver rankings. I did all the way through 24. We went through our first half, 1 to 12, those typical wide receiver ones if we're looking at the end of the season. Those are my predictions for who will end up in that wide receiver 1 position as far as fantasy points go. In this segment here, we are going to take a look at that back half of the list, who I have in the wide receiver 2 positions. Hopefully this can help you out with your fantasy drafts coming up as the season is just 9 days away now. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. But like I was saying in this segment here, we're going to finish up our wide receiver rankings and jumping off right where we left off at number 13. This is the start of that wide receiver 2 list. Chris Olave, by a lot of different sites, has been ranked all the way up. I think I saw him as far up as 8, sitting around the number 10 area. I have him dropped a little bit because of quarterback play. He is going to be the main weapon over there in New Orleans, but there's also a lot of mouths to feed over there. Derek Carr isn't the most elite quarterback. He's kind of a benchmark for, is your quarterback going to be good or not? If your quarterback's better than Derek Carr, I'd say they're at least an average quarterback. If they're worse, then they're a bad quarterback. That's how I view Derek Carr here, and he's not going to be able to support an offense that has this many weapons to give out, right? You have Chris Olave, who should get the lion's share, the most amount of targets, and probably the biggest numbers on the offense, but you also have Taysom Hill, who's going to gobble into those targets a little bit. Rashid Shaheed should be a lightning in a bottle kind of guy, getting a lot of deep targets, going to be like a boom or bust. If you remember back to like Deshaun Jackson kind of days, he might catch a 90-yard touchdown, or he might do nothing, right? That's going to take a little bit of production. Alvin Kamara, I don't know what he's going to be this year, but he ate up like 10 targets a game last year. I don't think he'll quite do that, but still, that's going to eat into Chris Olave a little bit. And also, Chris Olave has dealt with his fair share of injuries in his short career so far. That's not to say he's great, but that's not to say that he's not great. But that's why he drops out of the number 1 wide receiver rankings for me. Just a couple of spots down. He's squarely at the top of my wide receiver 2 list. At 14, I have Nico Collins. And Nico Collins is an interesting case, right? He really exploded at the end of last season once Tank Dell went down. CJ Stroud found him. They built a great connection together. Obviously, won a playoff game with him as the wide receiver 1. He earns himself a nice contract over the offseason. But Tank Dell's going to come back. Stephon Diggs is entering that offense. That is a lot of mouths to feed, not to mention Joe Mixon also enters the offense. I do think Nico Collins is going to be great. I do think the entire Texans offense is going to be great, and I don't think you're going to go wrong with just about any of those wide receivers. But it does get a little bit dicey, a little bit dangerous. You could pick the wrong one. Nico Collins, for my money, is going to be the best one in that room. He's got the most rapport, and he's playing a more traditional outside role, so he shouldn't get kicked out, and he should play more of the snaps, get more snap share than a guy like Tank Dell that plays the slot might not be out there when it comes to 2 wide receiver sets. So that's why I have Nico Collins up here at 14. At 15, we have Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle is a guy that I'm really high on this year. I have him up from a lot of other different websites. They have him down in the wide receiver 20-ish range. Jalen Waddle is a guy that I think people are forgetting about. We all remember that Puka Nacua set the all-time rookie reception record just last year. But he broke Jalen Waddle's record. Jalen Waddle had 111 just 2 seasons ago, or a little longer than 2 seasons ago. But when he was a rookie, he had that record. He also was hurt last year. We all remember Tyreek Hill, and we think he's going to be a little bit diminished in that offense because of Tyreek Hill. But when they were both on the field, they were both extremely productive. Jalen Waddle should be healthy. He's being overlooked. You can get him at really good value in the draft. He's my wide receiver 15. You grab him in like the 4th round-ish, 5th round maybe. That is great value for a guy that I think has the potential to finish in the top 12, top 15 of wide receivers. At 16, I've got Devonta Smith, the other half of that Eagles duo. Again, both of them have shown the ability to be extremely productive in this league. Not much has changed in the offense. Saquon Barkley brings in, it's a lot of what I said about A.J. Brown. The play action opportunity should get them more open. They won't be double covered as much. The defense has a lot more stress with Saquon now as a threat to run it, something the Eagles were kind of missing last year. It should really free up the field for both of these wide receivers a little bit, and I expect them both to be great. At number 17, DK Metcalf, Seahawks #1 receiver. Geno Smith loves throwing to him. I know there's a lot of conversation about Geno Smith and whether or not he deserves to be the starter over there in Seattle. He absolutely does. And DK Metcalf has never really had a bad season. He's got all the physical tools you want in a receiver. There's nothing you're looking at him and you're saying, oh, that guy can't succeed. He's built like nobody else is, right? That almost 8-pack picture that came out with him when he was in the draft. He's still a big guy, more physical than everyone, can go up and get the ball. He's bigger than everyone. And he's really fast. Obviously running down one of those highlights, those legendary highlights, running down Budda Baker on that would have almost pick six. He's fast. He's big. He's got everything you want in a receiver, and he should be great. At 18, I've got Michael Pittman. We talked about why his value is a little bit inflated this year when we brought up Gardner Minshew. He had 30% of targets last year. He's definitely going to take a little bit of a decrease, a little bit of a drop-off from where he was last year with Gardner Minshew, but that's not to say he's not going to be good. In a small sample size with Anthony Richardson, he continued to be productive. Just about four or five catches a game, 4.5 catches a game was his average for 45 yards. So we're looking at minimum 10 points, right? He scored a touchdown once in those 4 games, so a touchdown every 4 games. It's not going to be to the same level that he was last year, but he should still be very productive in this league with Anthony Richardson. Also, I think Anthony Richardson is going to take that next step this year. So he should be just as good. Maybe a little bit of a decrease because he's not going to get that 30% target share like he had last year. As we get to the last half, the back half of those wide receiver twos, just take a look at that list. If you have any questions about where I have things, if you're just coming in, go ahead and throw it in the chat. I'll go ahead and answer your question. But at 19, we're getting to Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is the other half of that Puka Nacua group. Again, I think those guys are very similar in terms of game. They play the same style of receiver. The question is which one is going to be covered more. I have Cooper Kupp a little bit further down because I'm a little more concerned about injuries with him. He is healthy, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have that injury history like he had last year. We'll see if he can stay healthy. He's also a little bit older, so I'm giving Puka a little bit of a boost here. They both should be really good, though. At 20, I have Brandon Ayuk, and the reason I have him all the way down here at 20 is not because I think he's the 20th best wide receiver. It's because I don't know where he's going to play. If we know for sure he plays in the 49ers, he probably gets bumped up, we'll say, to 13, 14, 15 range, right? Somewhere around there. He was incredible last year. He had the biggest depth, the longest depth of target out of any receiver in the league. He was incredibly efficient, a great route runner, and Brock Purdy loves throwing to him. I just don't know what his situation is, so I can't put him any higher than 20. Draft him skeptically, because he could be really good, but I'm not trusting him right now. At 21 is his potential teammate, Deebo Samuel. Deebo's a guy that, not a traditional wide receiver, not going to go out and play the X, is physical. He's like a bowling ball out there. He's going to bounce off of people, plays that running game, gets that rushing yard upside, get the running and passing touchdowns. He's going to be great. He's not going to be, the same explosive level that he was in 2021. Teams are keying in on him a little more, and his usage is a little bit down, but he still has that dual threat upside, and he is in my top 24. At 22, I'm dipping my feet into the Bears receivers. I think one of them will finish as the wide receiver too, as a wide receiver too. Whether that be DJ Moore, who is my favorite because he's been there the longest. He has the most experience in that offense, right? Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze the rookie. Keenan Allen came in. He didn't look in his best shape in the preseason either. DJ Moore, coming off a big contract that he's signing with the Bears, I think will be the alpha receiver there, although I could see it going to either of those other guys. One of the Bears receivers should finish in the top 24, and I'm betting on DJ Moore. At 23, we have another Texans receiver, Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs, he struggled at the end of last season. He dropped a couple of balls in the playoff. He's going down to Houston. I think he'll fix it. He's only got a 1-year deal, so it's a contract year. He should be playing his all. We'll see if he's happy there. That's going to be a big thing. Does he enjoy his time in Houston? He's only got 1 year, so he can leave if he isn't happy. But we will see what happens in there. He should still be really productive and really good with a great quarterback in CJ Stroud. And to round out the top 24, I have Malik Neighbors. Now, I did have a list of a couple other guys that I was really considering at 24, but I'm putting Malik Neighbors in there because he is the only thing that is going to be moving the offense in New York. Daniel Jones is not an attractive quarterback option, but if you give Malik Neighbors 6 slant routes, 2 screens a game, he'll catch 5 balls. He'll do magic with the ball in his hands. He's one of those great yak guys. And what Brian Daboll was able to do when the Giants were successful with Daniel Jones was really take advantage of that short RPO kind of action. And I think Malik Neighbors is the best receiver to do that. You get the ball in his hands and crazy things can happen. So I'm banking on some upside here, but he's the guy that I'm the most worried about on this list. I mentioned some honorable mentions. I've got 6 of them that could go in that 24 spot. So I did a top 30 kind of situation. They're not on the screen here, but Zay Flowers, number 1 receiver in Baltimore. Lamar Jackson is only going to get more comfortable passing with the threat of the run from Derrick Henry. We might see heavier boxes, leaving Zay Flowers to do his thing out against some corners. He should be really good. T. Higgins, especially if Jamar Chase is going to miss time, he should be able to gobble up all those targets that Jamar Chase would have gotten. And he's also on a contract here, looking to get paid next season. He's got a lot to prove. Amari Cooper, and this depends on his relationship with Deshaun Watson, if that's grown. He did his best work with Joe Flacco down the stretch of the season, as did most of the Cleveland receivers and tight ends. But I like Amari Cooper a lot, and he should be able to improve this year. George Pickens, wide receiver 1. Again, these are guys that are going to be getting all the targets for their teams. In Pittsburgh, I'm avoiding him a little bit because of the quarterback situation, and I don't know what's going to happen, but he doesn't need to separate to catch the ball. He's one of the best jump ball receivers in the entire league. And the last 2, Christian Kirk out of Jacksonville just is a solid receiver. He's not going to do anything flashy, but he should finish in somewhere between 20 and 30 overall in the wide receiver ranks. So if you're just looking for a guy that'll consistently get you points, I don't know, like 13 points a week in a PPR league, that's the guy to go for. And a similar thing for Terry McLaurin. You get rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels, but he has proven that he's quarterback proof. I love Terry McLaurin a lot this year. I've been able to get him in like the 8th, 9th, or 10th round, which I think is great value for a wide receiver 1. Terry McLaurin is a guy that I think could surprise a lot of people this year. But let me know what you think of my list. Anyone you think that I left out, anyone you think I rated too high, too low, I'd love to hear from you. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to transition into real football talk a little bit about some actual wide receiver situations, update you on Jamar Chase's situation, talk a little bit about CeeDee Lamb and where the Cowboys are at now that they have paid him. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished our top 24 wide receiver rankings for fantasy football this year. I hope that was helpful to all of you. If you want to go back and check it, it's all on a graphic. But if you disagree with me about anything, I'd love to hear from you. I'll let you know what my thoughts are if you do leave a comment. In this segment, we're going to transition to real wide receiver news outside of fantasy, talk a little bit about CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, or everybody else around the world to see. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, again, that message should pop up on the bottom of the screen. I appreciate anything you guys do give. Also, if you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we're going to get into some real wide receiver news for you guys here. Some real stuff that's going to get your head going. Where do the Cowboys go from this CeeDee Lamb contract? Who does it affect? Why did they wait this long to do it? These are all questions that are circulating now that CeeDee Lamb has signed his 4-year, $136 million contract, making him the second highest paid wide receiver in the league, also the second highest paid non-quarterback in the history of the league. He gets a lot of money. But the Cowboys are in a rough spot now. We kind of touched on it a little bit yesterday. They still need to sign Dak Prescott. They still need to sign Micah Parsons. There are a lot of guys that they need to go get. And if you're looking at the kind of money that those two guys are demanding, Dak Prescott is looking at, we'll say conservatively, 60 million, right? Micah Parsons is going to look to be the highest paid defender ever. We're looking at conservatively, we'll say another 30 million. Those three players combined are going to have around $120 million. Now, the cap will grow. Right now, it's sitting at about 250. If we estimate that it goes up to 260, 265, that is still almost 50% of the cap for those three guys. Now, that is not an ideal situation to be in. You say, are the Cowboys going to do that? In a perfect world, they're going to sign all of them. This is not a perfect world. That is a lot of money to spend on three positions. You're going to have to sacrifice elsewhere. We've already seen them sacrifice at a lot of places. They let Tyron Smith walk in free agency, a cornerstone of their offensive line. He is gone. Their running back room is barren, led by about 35-year-old Ezekiel Elliott, who has, outside of short yardage situations, all but outstayed his welcome in the league. Behind him is Rico Dowdle. They've got a lot of rookies that they're counting on. The defense is solid, but it's young, and they're going to have to start to pay some guys soon. They're running into the situation where they're going to start to run up against the salary cap, and that's not like where the Cowboys want to be. They need to start making these tough decisions. And I think they didn't want to pay CeeDee Lamb first. I've been having these discussions all offseason. Obviously, these are the three guys that the Cowboys have to pay. CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons. And out of those three guys, I'm assuming they're guaranteed to get two of them. And if they had to pick two of them, that's not to say that they can't get three. But if they had to pick two of them, CeeDee Lamb for me is the guy that I'm leaving out, because I think it's easiest to replace him. It's not easy to replace a top 4, top 3 receiver in the league, right? But out of all those positions, he's going to be the easiest one to replace. So I think what CeeDee Lamb's camp did was really smart. I think the Cowboys were trying to get his contract done last, doing Dak Prescott's first. But Dak Prescott wasn't negotiating very quickly, gave them to a point where CeeDee's like, hey, I'm going to hold out if you don't give me the contract. I'm not going to play. And in a world where they want to win a Super Bowl, they have their best shot with all three of those guys. If they're saying, hey, we might not have all three of these guys when it comes to the Saints, the Ravens, and the Giants, right? You say, oh, they have CeeDee Lamb, they go 3-1. But they don't have CeeDee Lamb. What do you think they do? Do you think they go 1-3, 2-2? Either way, that's a game they're losing, and that's an important game that they're losing when it comes to the playoff race. This is going to be a competitive division. If they want to win their division, that is the easiest way in. Now, I do think they get a wild card spot, as we talked about all the way back when we did the Cowboys review and the NFC playoff picture update, but these are important games. You can't be throwing games away because your best offensive weapon isn't there. And that put the Cowboys in a bind. They had to pay CeeDee Lamb. At least in my mind, that's how this went for the Cowboys. This wasn't the way they wanted to go, but they're roped into it now. Now they pay CeeDee. Now they're in danger of losing Dak Prescott. Now they're in danger of losing Micah Parsons. And now the question is, who out of those two guys are the Cowboys going to let walk? You can't let either. You can't let Micah Parsons walk. So are they going to let Dak Prescott walk? Is that why we saw so much Trey Lance in the preseason? He wasn't very good. 5 interceptions in one game, although he did lead the preseason in passing yards and rushing yards. So there was some good with the bad, but clearly not an NFL caliber quarterback. Are they going to run with Cooper Rush? Are they going to take a risk on a rookie? Are they going to go sign someone who's coming up in free agency next season? It's a tough question. It's a tough situation to be in if you're Dallas. Dak Prescott doesn't seem like he's going to take a hometown discount, and I definitely wouldn't expect Micah Parsons to take that hometown discount either. So it's not really a good situation for the Cowboys to be in, but they just got to run it back for this season, see if they can, get what they can get with their most put together roster that they have so far. I'm a little worried. I think Dak Prescott does end up leaving in the offseason because I definitely think he's testing free agency. At this point, there's no reason not to. Whether the Cowboys give you $60 million or some other team gives you $60 million, you're going to get the most money if you test free agency. Your price is going to go up. Some people are saying up to 65, which I think is ridiculous. Way too much money. But $60 million, I think, is something that he could absolutely get if he hits free agency. We don't see guys like that hit free agency that often. So I'm a little bit concerned for the Cowboys' future, if I'm being honest. I think they flew a little too close to the sun, thought everything was going to go out perfectly, get the guys signed in the order that they needed to get them signed to keep this team together, and now I think it's going to be tough for them to do that. But let me know what you think of the Cowboys. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll focus a little bit on Ja'Marr Chase, his situation, and what's going on with him and the Bengals. Stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the horrible situation the Cowboys have put themselves in now that they waited this long to sign CeeDee Lamb. The person that I think this affects the most outside of the Cowboys is Ja'Marr Chase, though. So we're going to talk a little bit about him, what that CeeDee Lamb contract means for him, and what his situation is right now with the Bengals. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'll answer it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate you all sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. But like I was saying, in this segment here, we are going to get a little bit of clarity on the Ja'Marr Chase situation. Right now, Ja'Marr Chase is the last of the big wide receivers that need to get signed. 11 wide receivers have been signed this offseason, ranging from a restructured contract with Amari Cooper all the way to Justin Jefferson getting his $35 million a year. Big range. We've reset the market about 3, 4, 5 times just this offseason. The wide receiver market has exploded, and Ja'Marr Chase is trying to take advantage of that. Obviously, it's a big advantage to sign your players sooner. If you're a team, I feel like you want to pay your players sooner rather than later, especially if you know you're going to pay them. Now, if it's a guy that you're like, maybe I won't pay, it's fine to wait. You're going to have to eat that extra $5 million a year or whatever it's going to be. But with a guy like Ja'Marr Chase, you know he's going to pay. You know you're going to pay him. He's still got 2 years left on his deal. This is his fourth in his regular 4-year contract that comes with all draft picks. He's making $7 million this year. 7.5, excuse me. Next season on his 5th-year option, which I assume the Bengals are going to pick up on, he would be getting $21 million a year. So that's a big pay jump right there, just from year to year. He's doing just fine on his own. But he wants his money now. He wants to be paid like one of the best receivers, and he's been holding out with a real chance that he isn't going to play week 1. Now, Bengals coaching staff and Bengals personnel are very confident that he will, so I'm honestly not too worried about his availability for week 1. He should be there. He practiced for the first time since his holdout, or his hold-in, began on Sunday, so that's a good sign, but reports are they're no closer to a contract. Now, I understand to a certain extent why Ja'Marr Chase wants more money, right? More money is more money. I don't blame him for wanting more money. But at the same time, you have to look at it the other way. We looked at it from a team perspective. Hey, if I pay you now, it's going to be cheaper, right? Because we don't need to go out and reset the market the next time it resets. Ja'Marr Chase is going to want to reset that market. He thinks he's better than Justin Jefferson. Whether or not he is up for debate. I personally don't think he is, but he's definitely in that conversation. So it's not insane to have him make $36 million a year while Jefferson is making 35, right? He wants that money and he wants it now. But think about from his perspective, if a guy like Brandon Ayuk comes out and gets, in some team like the Patriots, reset the market for him, which that's the only way I think he'd be going to the Patriots, because I don't know what's going on with him, but I feel like he wants to win football games, right? He goes over to the Patriots. He gets 35.5. He gets $36 million, right? Then Ja'Marr Chase gets 37. He gets more than Brandon Ayuk. It's more advantageous for him to eat $7 million this year, which he's going to take anyway. It's his contract extension. It doesn't take over for this new one. Maybe he'll get some signing bonuses here, but he's set. He's going to make his money. If I'm Ja'Marr Chase, I don't mind waiting one more season. Then you can hold out. You have 2 years left on your contract. If I'm the Bengals, I'm saying, okay, yeah, let's get a deal done. Because looking down the line, it only ever will get more expensive. It's never going to get cheaper if you wait. This isn't like waiting for a ticket at a ball game, right? Waiting to the last second, it could get cheaper. But when you're paying a guy, he's going to want to reset the market, especially a guy as good as Ja'Marr Chase is. This is not something that makes any sense for me from either side. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk all about the two. We're going to talk about one of the 2 remaining quarterback situations in the league that has yet to be decided: the New England Patriots, who they should start, who they will start, and why they're going to make those decisions. So we'll talk about all of that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've been doing a lot of wide receiver talk so far today, going over the top wide receivers I have for fantasy, 1 through 24, with a couple of honorable mentions thrown in there at the end. We also talked about Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb's extensions or possible extensions. In this segment, we're going to stay in football, but talk about a different position. Enough wide receiver talk. Today, we're going to finish off our show with some quarterbacks discussion. Right now, there's only 2 quarterbacks positions in the league that have yet to be decided for week 1. We talked a little bit about the Steelers yesterday. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the Patriots, their discussion between Drake May and Jacoby Brissett. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. But like I was saying, we're going to finish off our show today talking a little bit about the quarterback situation in New England. New England's going through a lot of changes. Obviously, no more Bill Belichick. That's the biggest one. Jerod Mayo, in his first year as head coach, has a lot of very important decisions to make. Now, no one is expecting the Patriots to be this great force coming out of the AFC East. In fact, I would wager that just about everybody has them finishing last in that division, with a couple of people even having them be the worst team in the league. Now, some of that has to do with the quarterback situation. A lot of that has to do with everything else on the team. They arguably have the worst wide receiver core. They arguably have the worst offensive line. The defense has lost almost all of its star power, with Christian Barmore going out because of blood clots. We don't know when he'll come back, if he'll be back for this season. Matthew Judon being traded away. But right now, the spotlight, as it is most of the time, is on the battle between these 2 quarterbacks. You have veteran Jacoby Brissett, started for half a dozen teams in this league, right? Been everywhere, usually as a stopgap guy, and that's his role here. He also started on the Patriots. He has experience in the Belichick system, not that it is the same, but it's going to be a similar style offense, I assume, Jerod Mayo being a Belichick disciple and all. This is a team that has an interesting decision, because if they were purely looking at the numbers and saying, we're going to start the best quarterback, it would be Drake May. Drake May in the preseason and reportedly throughout the back half of practice as we head into the regular season has been the better quarterback by just about every metric. Looking at the eye test, he's been better, dealing with pressure, getting more yards on plays. Expected completion percentage, they've both been bad. They're both in the negative. Even the advanced stats are all on Drake May's side. So you're looking at the situation and you're saying, oh, cut and dry, simple. Start Drake May. Start the rookie, get him some experience. And that makes sense to a certain extent. You're only going to get better if you get reps, right? And you're not going to get reps sitting on the bench. But at the same time, this Patriots offensive line is abysmal. They took 8 penalties against the second unit of Washington. The second unit of Washington, a defense that is not supposed to be that great. They were awful against them. The pressure has been in everybody's face. They take a bunch of sacks. They have no time in the pocket. And we've already seen some injuries take place. This is not a good situation for either of these quarterbacks. So here's your dilemma. Do you put a guy in Drake May who has been better, just straight up, than Jacoby Brissett in to get absolutely demolished? Or do you let Jacoby Brissett take the lumps for this team while you let it get better? And there is not really a right answer. Now, it's not necessarily fair to Jacoby Brissett to be a sacrificial lamb, right? Because that's the role that he's playing. He's going to be that sacrificial lamb if he is starting. because we look at all these numbers, everything is in Drake May's favor, and I would be shocked if he doesn't play at some point in this season. But do you want to keep him for the easier part of the schedule? As we get down towards the back half of the season, they end it against, the Bears, Rams, Dolphins, Colts, a bye week, then the Cardinals, Bills, Chargers, and Bills again. That's the back half of the schedule. Maybe you get him in to start against the Titans in week 9. You throw that at the front of that. Those defenses are some of them are good. I like the Bears defense a lot. I think the Rams could have a solid pass rush. The Bills, I'm not out completely on their defense yet. Their pass rush is definitely their best part. But you look at the front half of the schedule. First of all, they have the Jets twice. One of the best defenses in the league. They have the 49ers. They have the Seahawks, who I think are going to have a solid pass rush this year, and the Bengals, who have a lot of really good edge rushers, and their tackles also very solid. If you were looking at a team or an easier stretch of schedule for a guy that, you're always going to take your hits, especially behind a bad offensive line. But if you're looking for the most advantageous part to put your young quarterback in, you probably wait until week 9-ish of the season to play him. Now, you're going to take your lumps. You're going to start off slowly. It's not going to be easy. And you're going to have a lot of calls for Jacoby Brissett to be relieved as the starting quarterback. Because as neutrally good as Jacoby Brissett is, as a fringe starting quarterback, as a guy that could be a starter, but is one of just the elite backups in this league, right? Stopgap guy, the perfect guy for that. He knows his role. He knows he's not here to be the starter or to keep that job forever. You should probably start him at the beginning of the season. And I know that's not what Patriots fans want to hear. I know that's not what most fans of the NFL want to hear. I know personally, if it was up to me, I would want Drake May to start. I would want Drake May the rookie to get some reps. That's what I want to happen. But if I'm sitting here and I'm saying I don't want him to get killed, play him in the back half of the season. Start him in week 9. Let him get slightly easier defenses. Don't let him play the Jets. That's really what I'm looking at. Get him past the Jets. The Jets are going to kill this Patriots offensive line. It's not going to be fun. Let Jacoby Brissett deal with that half. It doesn't make sense, but it is a tough decision to be in. And it's not an easy position to be in for anybody. But we'll see what Gerard Mayo and the Patriots have to do. The other quarterback battle we talked about yesterday, the Steelers still haven't made a decision. They're supposed to make a decision by the end of the week. Those are the last two to make. We'll see what ends up happening. I think Drake May is the better quarterback. All the numbers say that, but I don't want him to get killed. So get your stopgap guy to be a stopgap guy, but maybe not for a full season. I want to see some reps from Drake May. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we talked about in today's episode. We'll be back here tomorrow talking about running backs. We'll do our running back rankings. Also, cut day happened today. All rosters are down to 53. Our final rosters are set. We're going to go through all the major cuts, some trades that happened today that happened a little too late for me to be prepared for on this show. We'll talk about that in some detail tomorrow and anything else that happens in the world of sports. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. You have been listening to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in, but I will see you same time, same place tomorrow. You all have a good one. Goodbye.
Let's go. Bit of drool, I'm up to enough for that. It's gonna be a bad day.